Hello and welcome to the IMD Podcast Network. Today, IMD Professor Mike Wade is in conversation with Caspar Herzberg, the CEO of AVEVA, a multinational IT consulting company headquartered in Cambridge in the UK. They'll discuss Herzberg's non-traditional career path, the principles of leading successful turnarounds, and how AVEVA is leveraging radical collaboration and AI to drive value in the industrial sector.
Hello and welcome to the interview. I'm joined today by the CEO of AVEVA, Caspar Herzberg. And maybe we can start, Caspar. Maybe not everybody is familiar with AVEVA. If you could explain a little bit about what the company does.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me here. AVEVA, we're an industrial software company. What that means is that we fundamentally make life better by delivering life's essentials. So anything from food to energy to power to the industries that supply all of your needs generally tend to be designed or operated by AVEVA software. So that's what we do, and we're very proud of it.
And throughout your career, you've been involved in a number of turnarounds, including at AVEVA. And I suppose some of the viewers are also looking into turnarounds or thinking about turnarounds. What have you learned throughout these experiences that you could share, some of the wisdom that you've learned?
Well, it gets better every time, so that's the first one. Secondly, one needs to stay calm and start by really listening, understanding your environment, understanding the issues, understanding why leaders before, who are more likely than not as capable or as good as you were, why they have not succeeded. Once you think you have understood, you devise a plan, you share this plan with enough people to give views on how likely it is to succeed, and then you execute it with a steely determination. I think that's basically how you do that. And then maybe one thing to say, you have to balance between understanding that only fools persist in errors, and on the other hand, flip-flopping all the time. So there is a golden middle, and when you find that golden middle, then you usually succeed.
And how do you find that golden middle? Is it something you developed in your gut over time, that you kind of sense that, now's the time to change or now's the time not to change? Do you just trust in the data? Is it some combination of that?
It's a combination of data, of the team that you're able to assemble. I mean, in the end, as a leader, you will more likely than not understand every detail of what it is you're faced with. So you have to get a big enough team with diverse enough views that you bring together that then allows you to chart a way, and then you have to stick to that way. That's basically it.
And your career trajectory, in fact your life trajectory, I think is maybe interesting for the viewers, because it's not I would say a traditional path. You grew up in Cairo. Yes. As a young man, instead of going to university, or as I guess many of your peers did, you joined the army as a private. You rose up through the ranks. You went to university, but you stayed in the armed forces full time, but then as a reservist. After that, you joined the corporate world and you moved to many different locations. You've lived and worked all over the world. So this is not, I would say, the traditional path for a leader or for a CEO. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. Why did you make those decisions, and how did it shape what you've become today as a leader?
Well, I guess as a teen, I always wanted to be an army officer. That was my dream, and the way to do that was by enlisting in Germany at the time, which I did. I learned a lot of useful lessons on leadership, on how much you can push yourself, how much you can push others. So that definitely helped me later on. I got the opportunity to study in England, which I took. So I left the army, and that opened my mind I studied Oriental studies, Arabic and modern Middle Eastern studies. I wanted to be an intelligence man at the time. I then worked with some of them and realized this is not the career you think it is. And then I got the lure of at the time it was Anderson Consulting, the corporate world. So I think you should do what you like, what you're interested in, and then life will find out what you're good at. And eventually people will trust you because you're good at certain things. And provided you're humble, you understand that you are good at some and really bad at others, and you're quite clear on that, they trust you with more and more responsibility. And that is what happened during my corporate career. The reason I moved around so lot and worked in so many places is because generally I was always ready to do the things other people weren't. Work in markets that were too dangerous, too not accessible enough, too difficult, take challenges that others didn't want to take. And over time, if you do that consistently, you learn more. You learn a lot, not necessarily more, but you learn a lot. You learn from your failures. I've had many, quite big ones at times. I was fortunate enough to work with leaders that gave me a second chance. I applied what I learned, and then I made new mistakes somewhere else, but at least they were different. And so over time, people trust you, and as they trust you, you try not to let them down. And I guess the most important thing is not to let people who trust you down, and that goes both above you and the people that work with you. And that's kind of how I go with things.
And you mentioned earlier that you learn about what you're good at and what you're not necessarily good at. So what you're good at is going into new situations and making sense of them. Is that one of the things that you've built and developed over your career?
Yeah, I would say so. I'm curious. I'm curious about business, things I don't understand that are new. I'm curious also about places I haven't been to. So the combination is usually very interesting, and you just gain much more from that experience. I once read that Alexander the Great, that his main reason for trying to conquer the world was that he was basically a tourist. He just wanted to see the world. And I sometimes feel I'm a businessman because I like to see more of the world and of the people, of the businesses, of how the world really works and interact with it. And I find that an incredibly rewarding experience. And then if you carry an organization with you, and that organization does well as a result, and that's very rewarding.
And what about the things you learned about yourself that you're not so good at, things that need to be improved? Are there, and how do you, in your role as CEO, compensate for those things?
I think the immediate answer is you get help and advice, and also you work with the people who know about what you don't know. And you bring these on board. And then you have to, of course, create an environment where they are happy and they want to keep working with you, although you might not have their expertise. So you have to compensate that in other ways. Maybe the second thing I've learned is that one thinks one is really good at certain things, and then you realize that actually you're just average, and you have to actually work on that a bit more. So I think everything is a continuous learning, and I say that, I really mean that, including leadership and how good you are at making decisions or assessing situations. There's always, as you realize later, things you've missed. So the more you've done, the more you experience, the more you realize how little you know. I think that's how that is.
What are some of the most interesting places that you've lived or worked in, and why? Maybe link it to learning, the places that you really learned a lot from that experience or that place.
Well, I definitely, I think growing up in Egypt, which is both a beautiful place, Cairo is a massive city, it's a very difficult place, can be a very difficult place. And that helped me in the army, that helped me later, that fundamentally, dealing with at times complex environment is a good thing to experience, right? I'd say the second one is I worked at Cisco early on in Saudi Arabia on smart cities. I was one of the people that started this, this global movement. one of many. I turned that into a very, very big deal for a city at the time called King Abdullah Economic City. It's north of Jeddah. And it was an absolute failure, commercial failure. I was beaten by a competitor after having hyped the company for 2 years on the importance of this deal. And that was a very unfortunate experience for me, from which I learned. I mean, there were technical mistakes I made on the commercial side, lessons learned there. And there was also the lesson of what happens when you go from overhyped star in a company to the guy that no one wants to be seen with. And then go to a second chance, which I was fortunate enough that John Chambers, the chairman at the time, CEO and chairman at the time, allowed me to go to Korea and try the same thing again. And then armed with these lessons, we were more successful there. And from that, it created more success, including in China, in West China, in Chongqing. So that was a wonderful experience, but it did start with a very painful, very painful lesson.
Let's switch gears a little bit to talk about ecosystems. AVEVA and IMD are working together on a project to try and better understand industrial ecosystems, how to build them, how to extract value from them, how to manage them. Where do you, in your view, how do you see the role of ecosystems today in the industrial world?
Well, I mean, things are very complex in the industrial world. I mean, the average factory has hundreds of systems, hundreds of softwares, right? That's just within one company. If you multiply that over supply chains, there are thousands of systems, thousands of different data sets that have enormous value locked in them, if you like, but that don't speak to each other, that aren't brought together. We can significantly decomplexify supply chains, especially in this changing world now where we have to do that, gain value of that. But we can only do that if we trust each other more and are willing to collaborate. And that's what ecosystems do, right? Where even competitors, where that is possible and legal, can come together and share data, because this data ultimately unlocks value across their supply chains. And that's super important for us as a company that is involved with more than 30,000 industrial companies that are customers, right? But we also recognize that we are not the only game in town. There's other companies and we have to interface with them, and it's only if we interface well with everyone and are truly agnostic that this value can be extracted. And that needs trust, and this is what ecosystems at their best create.
But as you mentioned, in the industrial world, in the B2B space, organizations are notoriously unwilling to share data. So how can you convince them that it's in their best interest to do that?
Well, someone very intelligent told me during this week that if we replace sharing data with sharing insights, then that unlocks, on the one hand, value and also feels less threatening. I mean, the result is the same. Right, you understand better what the other side does, but I feel that a lot of company leaders and especially business unit leaders are worried about the effect of sharing closely held trade secrets, if you like, with others. Now, having said that, in the world of industrial software, there aren't really trade secrets. There is just the performance of machines measured in time series data that, when understood and analyzed, unlocks massive value, because you can have these machines not go down. You can be much more efficient in how you produce. You can reduce waste massively. You can be more sustainable. So all of that is worth it to overcome this fear. I think the more we talk about that, and the more this business case is understood, the better.
And you have a concept that you talk about often, radical collaboration. What is this radical collaboration?
Well, it's overcoming that fear of losing out, or that fear of being taken advantage of, and collaborate with each other, because the prize that you can unlock is significantly bigger than what you may lose as a result of a competitor understanding that you have the same issues they have in your machines, let's say, in the industrial world. I mean, I think it can go across other sectors as well.
And how do you build that radical collaboration within your own organization?
Yeah, well, I mean, it always starts at home. I think first by realizing that people like silos. And the more you understand that, it is a basic human tenet to want, when you don't feel safe, to build walls around you, to keep the wolves out, if you like, right? So the more you create an environment in your company where people feel that if there is performance, there is belonging, that there is no randomness, that they understand that you are transparent with good, with difficult decisions, the more they understand that, the more they are willing to let go of their silos and to share their data. I mean, a case in point is AVEVA itself. We are formed out of 3 companies originally with very different cultures, different ways of managing data, sharing data, different cultures. So just breaking down these walls is something we are still doing, to be perfectly frank, but it's worth it. Right? And ultimately, being able to go from design to operate to optimize the entire cycle, there's significant value in that, and in bringing this knowledge, this data together in one place.
And I think this is a very common challenge. Silos within organizations, fighting internal battles instead of fighting outside. How do you manage that transformation from a cultural point of view? You have these 3, companies that came together to form AVEVA. I guess they have their own identities, probably their histories. Yes. How do you manage that to break I think break is not the right word, but to sort of make sure the whole is greater than the sum of the parts?
The first one is first of all, is to understand it. I think not everyone is aware or cares that this is a huge productivity inhibitor, right? The second one is to bring leaders equally from these companies into the top. So you have leaders representing almost every side, right? But not necessarily then allowing them to create a full silo. They have to be responsible end to end. We did, in this case, in our case, bring together both the sales force and the R&D, the 2 most complex organizations, right? And then the last point is we have to realize that this is a continuous process. I mean, trust is built over a very long period of time. People build relationships over a long period of time, and you have to be patient. I think that's probably the one, yeah.
Let me ask you a question about maybe the hottest topic in tech at the moment, which is AI. And of course, you're an organization that's dealing with massive amounts of data in the industrial world. Where do you see the role of AI, and how is it going to shift and change how value is created in the industrial world?
Well, I think the first is to realize that AI is a tool, like any other technology. There is no difference, right? And if you don't know what you're doing, then don't use that tool. In other words, if you don't have a good strategy, if you don't know what you want to achieve, just randomly equipping everyone with capabilities is probably not the best way of leveraging a fairly transformative, technology. So that is maybe the first thing to say. In the industrial world specifically, it clearly eliminates repetitive tasks. It does, right? There are a lot of them, right? Agency, so AI agents, can play an important role in, for example, allowing, after you've done predictive analytics, so time series-based analytics, understanding when machines break down, then create agents that then schedule, for example, maintenance processes, so scheduling a repair crew on a wind farm, for example, to automate that, saves a lot of time, and more likely than not is going to significantly improve the performance of your industrial assets. So I think identifying these use cases, of which they're well understood, I think that works really well. The other one is, if you think, we've mentioned earlier, in the average factory there are dozens, potentially hundreds of systems. All of them come with manuals. If as decision support you have an AI agent that understands these manuals, summarizes the pertinent points, proactively asks you, whether you would like to have dashboards, there's a lot of value in that, especially as you try to bring a new, younger workforce that don't have necessarily the domain expertise of people who have done something for 30 years, as you try to bring them on board. Now, one key caveat is that the way you ask questions is as important to learn as is interpreting the answers, especially with large language models. So this is not a yes and no thing. This is a probabilistic answer, and you have to use it as such, right? So there are some limitations to what AI will do in industry as well, and I think we have to be clear about those as well. Yeah.
Are you using AI internally within AVEVA to improve your products and services and your go-to-market and all of that?
So we do. We absolutely do. We have started to use it on the customer success side, so making our customers successful, dealing with issues with our technologies in the response of technical support, for example, all of that. Secondly, for knowledge management, I mean, I mentioned earlier we've had 3 companies. It's actually 3 big companies and maybe another 40 small companies with specialist software, all of them with knowledge that is often just guarded by a few people or even just lingers on in a database somewhere. Accessing all of that with AI, with an orchestration layer, making that ready for our employees, that's one of the big transformations we have. And I expect that we are, first of all, learning what we have, that all of us in the company, all 10,000 people that work at AVEVA and the 2 associated companies, RIB and ETAP, understand the capabilities we have ourselves, and then are also, of course, able to go outside with the same agent and compare, contrast, and learn from it.
And then maybe stepping back from the company, you know, what is your point of view on the role of AI going forward in society? Are you an optimist? Are you a pessimist, or somewhere in between?
I'm a pragmatist, I would say. I think it's clearly very transformative. I think we also need to learn the boundaries of using this new technology. Who can use this new technology? At what age? Why? For what reason? For what purpose? Not every aspect that is currently, let's say, on social media with fake movies is something that adds a lot of value to humankind. So I think sooner or later we will need to collectively take a probably much harder stance on a lot of what is out there than we are taking today. On the positive side, the augmentation of the worker, of the frontline knowledge worker, kind of what I've tried to describe at AVEVA, I think is a hugely productivity enhancing phenomenon that is going to give us a lot more. And then maybe in the middle, the obviously between industry, between infrastructure, between the world of the military, there are a lot of applications of AI that I think we will have to live with. Many are good and many are going to be challenges, but in the end, I mean, AI serves human, not the other way around. That is, I think, a fallacy to believe that it is anything other than a technology that serves mankind.
Yeah, and hopefully for good.
Hopefully for good.
Hopefully for good. Maybe we can conclude with any advice that you could share through your experiences, the transformation that's happening today, leaders that are facing transformation. It could be to do with AI, but it doesn't have to be. You know, it could be workforce transformation or strategic transformation. You know, what are some of the things that some of the key messages you would like to leave the viewers with?
I would, first of all, I think I'm as much someone who learns as someone who gives advice. So I think that's probably the first thing to say. Generally, one will make a lot of decisions, right? Many of them one should make very fast. A few of them one should take their time with. And I think the trick is figuring out which is which. And the more successful you are, the more you figured out which you should really think through and ask advice and potentially not do something, right? And what you have to decide very fast, either because it needs to happen fast or because it's just not worth thinking a lot about. And I think this takes a bit of experience to get there. So experience is good. Some people have it naturally. I mean, there are natural born leaders that are very, very good at it. I think that's what I would say.
It sounds a bit like the famous Amazon one-door and two-door decisions. right? Where if it's a two-door decision, you can go and you can come back, you make it quickly, you don't worry too much about it.
That's a good way. I think people have been struggling with the same question for eternity. So yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Well, Caspar, thank you so much
My
for
pleasure.
taking the time to speak with us today.
Yeah.
It's been a great pleasure to talk to you.
Same here. Same here.
That's all for this week. This podcast was proudly brought to you by the International Institute for Management Development in Lausanne. You can find out more at imd.org.